Auspicious greetings to everyone. Welcome back to our History of Indian Buddhism. Today will be our class 7. Last class, we talked about the establishments of Abhidhamma, and also we explained about why the nature of the Abhidhamma and how it later on becomes so complicated. And in this class, we will start to discuss about one of the major school, the Madhyamaka school. Why is it so important to know about these two major schools, the Madhyamaka and also the Yogacara? Because these two schools have huge impact into the Chinese Buddhism. So we have, in order to know about Chinese Buddhism, we have to have more or less some understanding about these two major schools. So today we will talk about the Madhyamaka school, about the founder, and also a brief understanding about what is the Madhyamaka school. And next week we will talk about the teachings in the Madhyamaka school. A brief introductions of the Madhyamaka schools. The Madhyamaka schools of Buddhism, the followers of which are called Madhyamikas, was one of the two principal schools of Mahayana Buddhism in India. The other school being the Yogacara. So in order to know about the teachings in the Chinese Buddhism and also even Tibetan Buddhism, you have to more or less know about these two important schools. The name of the school is a reference to the claim made of Buddhism in general, that it is a middle path, Madhyama Pratipat, that avoid the two extremes of existence and non-existence. The doctrines that all things exist because of condition and all things cease because of condition. Hence, these concepts break the attachment of existent and non-existent. So in general, basically Madhyamaka school is not just talk about emptiness. Its main teachings is about middle path. It's explained about the impermanence and non-self. Impermanence and non-self means the changes. We have this thing exist, but it will cease. So people attach to existent or non-existent. But in Madhyamaka school, it tried to explain to us that everything arises due to conditions and also everything ceases due to conditions. And this is the basic teachings in Buddhism, which is the Three Dharma seal. The principle of the Madhyamaka school, which can be called the centrist school in English, is that this middle path is best achieved by a denial that things have any inherent nature at all. All things are, in the other words, empty of inherent nature. This doctrine of universal emptiness of inherent nature is the hallmark of the school, which placed the school solidly in the tradition associated with the profession of wisdom, Prajnaparamita, literature of Mahayana Buddhism. This paragraph is very important because the Madhyamaka school established from a person called Nagarjuna. And this Nagarjuna, basically, he have profound understanding of the teachings in the Prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom. A part of the is one of the literature of the Mahayana Buddhism. So in this Prajnaparamita, Basically, it's a wisdom that understand the truth of this universe beyond our normal understanding. And through this understanding, we know that all things are exist due to conditions. And that's why there's nothing for us needs to be so attached to. So the founder of Madhyamaka school was Nagarjuna. This person is very important. Later on, I will explain why he's so important. But as a Buddhist, we besides knowing the Buddha, we also have to know a few important monastic. One of these monastic is called Nagarjuna. The two major texts in Madhyamaka schools are Mula Madhyamaka Karikas, verses on the firmly fixed middle way, and the Vigrahavatani, turning back objections. So these are the two important texts, and later on I will also give a brief introduction about these two texts, or maybe in next class we will talk a little bit more about these two texts. So let's start to talk about the founder, Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna was perhaps the most influential Indian Buddhist thinker after Gautama Buddha, after the Buddha, who founded the Madhyamaka middle way school of Mahayana great vehicle Buddhism. So this person is in Tibetan Buddhism, he was regarded as the second Buddha. He is credited with writing the most well-expressed explanation of Sunyata-vada, the doctrine of emptiness, was the first to propose the two truth doctrines, and was an abbot of the famous Buddhist university, Nalanda. Nagarjuna's writings had a major influence not only on the development of Mahayana Buddhist thoughts, but also in triggering Hindu responses to Buddhism, as particularly evidence in Advaita. So in here is that Nagarjuna had a lot of writings, and his writings mainly emphasize on the explanation of sunyata. And he tried to break through our attachment in the two extreme. And in order to break through the attachment and the misunderstanding of the two extreme, he wrote a lot of books, and also he went to a lot of debates with different schools in order to clarify the not appropriate teachings in that school. And besides having debate with the Buddhism schools, he also have debate with the Hindu, because at that time Hinduism already start to flourish again, and people are starting to try to emerge the Buddhism and Hinduism, their teachings together, and that's why Nagarjuna is trying to refute that. Nagarjuna's idea lay the three theses Sanlun school in China, and he is considered the second Buddha in Tibet. So this three theses Sanlun school in China is one of the most important school during the Tang Dynasty. And this school basically talks about sunyata, and also to refute the two extreme. And in Tibet, Nagarjuna was considered the second Buddha. Nagarjuna is often miscategorized as a nihilist due to his radical rejections of self. Closer inspections, however, revealed in Nagarjuna the profound grasp of existence as interdependence and the interdependence of self and others. So, in many years ago, when Buddhism transmitted to the Western country, those early professor, when they read the teachings in the Madhyamika school, they have this misunderstanding is that Madhyamika school talks about emptiness, nothing, nothing. Because in the Madhyamika's philosophy, Nagarjuna refute the self. So people misunderstood that he is a nihilism person. However, Nagarjuna has not rejecting about the self. He's just trying to explain to us that the existence of self needs to be interdependence from a lot of things, and the other things have to will exist also because of us. So this self will change in their status based on the conditions at that time. It's not a fixed identity. It's an identity that will change because it's interdependence with other things. And this is the key teachings in the middle school or the Madhyamaka school. According to the Indian historian Kumarajiva, Nagarjuna was born in South India, near the town of Nagarjunakunda, in what is present-day Andhra Pradesh, into a wealthy Hindu Brahmin family. So Nagarjuna, he was not born as a Buddhist. He was also one of the members of the Brahma family, of the Brahmin family. And that's why he has the ability to learn Sanskrit, or he has the position to learn Sanskrit. His Hindu upbringing may account for the fact that Nagarjuna was one of the earliest significant Buddhist thinker to write in the Sanskrit language rather than in the Pali script. Remember that in our class, I mentioned that the Sanskrit is considered a spiritual languages. So it's a language whereby the Hindu priests chant and communicate with the God, because God can only listen to the Sanskrit. So this Sanskrit is only been known by the Brahman or by the higher level, the first level, the kings that will learn this Sanskrit, and normal people will not, they won't have the chance to learn how to learn the Sanskrit. But because of the background of Nagarjuna, he is able to learn the Sanskrit. And later on, we can talk about his background or his legend. You will know why that later on when he wrote the thesis, he wrote in Sanskrit, because he has this background. During his lifetime, he was the abbot of the Buddhist University, Nalanda. This Nalanda is a very important place. It located in the present-day state of Bihar, India, and became renowned as a master of the 5 major branches of traditional Buddhist learning: the grammar, logic, and epistemology, the arts, medicine, and spiritual practice. This place, Nalanda, during that time was considered a very big university. It's not just that place does not only teach about the Dharma only, but it also teach grammar, logic, art, medicine, etc. So this university is in the place right now is called Bihar. And this place is not considered a very urban type of place. And Nalanda, when Buddhism started to decline and Islam started to invade it in, the Islamic burned the Nalanda's university for many weeks. A lot of writings, a lot of sutras, a lot of scriptures were burned by the Islamic. But this is a war. So we are not going to talk about why they did this type of things. From a study of his writing, it is clear that Nagarjuna was conversant with both the Abhidharma-based philosophies of his day and the emerging Mahayana tradition, as well as non-Buddhist school of thoughts. Judging by the contents of the most commonly accepted list of the texts he wrote, he was clearly a Mahayanist, although he does not mention any of Mahayana texts in his most famous work, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, Chinese called Zhonglun. So, because of Nagarjuna's background, he's able to learn the Hinduism scripture, and he learned other schools' thoughts. So he's very familiar with the Abhidharma. He was a very smart person, intelligent person. When learning all these philosophies, theories, and also the teachings from different schools, he started to have his own judgment, and he analyzed things, and then after that lists out in the text that written by him. And through his writing, it shows that he's a Mahayanist person, even though in his writing in Mula Madhyamaka Karika, he did not say that I am a Mahayanist. And this is something which is special. It could also be argued that the Mula Madhyamaka Karika was meant to serve as a logical stepstones to the second turning of the will teachings, by beginning with the premises of the first turning, in order to guide readers to the second. So some scholars argue that these early writings by Nagarjuna, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, was actually a stepping stone for people to understand the teachings. So in a way, it's a skillful means of writing. And a lot of people says that during the Buddha's time, he taught the Dharma to the 5 disciples. That was the first turning of the Dharma wheel. And when Nagarjuna wrote the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, that was the second turning of the Dharma wheel. So some people say that there are 3 turnings of the Dharma wheel, and somebody says that there are 2 turning of the Dharma wheel. But of course, history change all the time. When I say history change all the time, means that in this period of time, people say about this. In the next period of time, people say about that. So which one should we believe? It is just part of the information that we need to know. That's all. Okay. Nagarjuna, the legend of Nagarjuna is believed to have been a magician. Besides, he was a person that born in a Brahmin family, have received very good education, know the Sanskrit. In his legend, it also believed that he was a magician and also a playboy who, when caught taking his pleasure with some of the loyal ladies by a local king, and had a moment of profound remorse, became a monk, and thereafter devote himself wholeheartedly to Buddhist teachings. So in here, this story of the Nagarjuna that he was a magician and also a playboy. Because he was so intelligent, so he was very proud of himself, and he knows about magic. That's why he started to make himself transparent and went to the palace, and then have his pleasure with some of the royal ladies. So these royal ladies complained to the local king, say that somebody molested them while they were sleeping. And the king start to try to catch this person, catch Nagarjuna. And finally, they caught Nagarjuna and his friends. The king managed to caught Nagarjuna and Nagarjuna's friend. Because the king was so angry, he killed Nagarjuna's friend. However, Nagarjuna able to escape out. But when he saw that his friend was being killed, he felt so sad. And he suddenly realized that life is so fragile. Life is so fragile. And anger was so scary. And he started to ask about what is the meaning of life. The same thing, he asked the same questions like what the Buddhas asked. Why our life is so short and with so much suffering? So because of this, he decided to become a monk. And he devoted himself completely to the Dharma. To the Dharma. And through this, completely devote himself to the Dharma, he started to realize that a lot of teachings from the Buddha, from so many schools, were not completely right. And that's why he started to explore into all the teachings of all these schools and start to refute the wrong teachings from these schools. Another legend. Nagarjuna travels deep into the ocean, deaf to the home of Naga king. Naga means dragon. Naga are dragon-like beings, usually extremely hostile to humans. Nagarjuna discourses on Dharma, Buddhist teachings, with the Naga king, who is so delighted with what Nagarjuna says that he allows him to return to the surface and give him the complete corpus of the Prajna Paramita literature as a parting gift, telling Nagarjuna that these are the authentic words of the Buddha, which he has kept safely locked away in the depth of his ocean layer since Buddha passing, awaiting a sage wise enough to disseminate them to human. Nagarjuna is thus credited with literally bringing this hidden literature to light. This is so-called a legend. Whether this thing happens or not, nobody's know. But it passed on from generation to generation. And besides these two legends, there are different type of legends in Tibetan Buddhism, in Chinese Buddhism. And of course, in Indian Buddhism, because Indian Buddhism already declines, almost disappeared. So Theravada tradition also have some information about Nagarjuna, but because Nagarjuna was considered a Mahayanist, and that's why in Theravada might not have so much information of him. And in this legend, Nagarjuna went to the ocean and have a good time discussions with the Dragon King. And the Dragon King gets so happy that this wise person visited him. And that's why he decided to give Nagarjuna a gift before he returned back to surface. The Dragon King gave Nagarjuna this text or this literature called the Prajna Paramita literature. And this Prajna Paramita literature is considered the ultimate wisdom in the Buddha's teachings, of the Buddha's teachings. It is a wisdom that not easily understood by normal people. And that's why when Nagarjuna, he get this Prajna Paramita literature, he went back to the surface, to the land, and he start to wrote things about the teachings in the Prajna Paramita. Again, according to the Chinese legends of Nagarjuna, because Prajna Paramita is so profound, with very profound teachings, but most of the teachings are unable to be understandable by normal people. So Nagarjuna did not record down all the teachings. He picked those teachings that he thought that is important, but also at the same time is easy for people to understand. This is according to the Chinese Buddhism about the legend of Nagarjuna. So Nagarjuna's writings, there are a number of influential texts attributed to Nagarjuna. Although many were likely written by later authors, the only text that all scholars agree was written by him is the Mula Madhyamika Karika, which contain the essential of his thought in 27 short chapters. So if you would like to know about the teachings of Nagarjuna, you should look into this Mula Madhyamaka Karika. And you will say that in that case, how about the other writings from Nagarjuna? Don't forget that when a person wrote something, when this person passed away, somebody will try to interpret what this person wrote, and they start to put in some wordings. Many other works are attributed to Nagarjuna, some of which may be genuine and some not. There is evidence that a second, later Nagarjuna was the author of a number of tantric works that have subsequently been incorrectly attributed to the original Nagarjuna. So again, you might ask is that in this case, which books are actually from Nagarjuna? From Nagarjuna. You have to read into it And if you want to have a guideline that this guideline can guide you that whether this book is right or wrong, then you should base on the basics teachings in Buddhism. The Four Noble Truths, the Three Dharma Seal, the Eightfold Path, and the 12 Links. If any of the teachings in those books that say that written by Nagarjuna, but does not agree with the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, Three Dharma Seal, and 12 Links, then you should consider whether to continue to read this book. So if a writing says that Buddhism talk about nihilism, then this is not the book or the teachings from the Buddha. So this is something that I always guide a student, is that if you want to know whether this teacher is a true Buddhist teacher or a true Buddhist monastic, listens to what he said. If this person asks you to attach to something, then you probably have to think twice. If this person says that at this point of time, you have to diligently learn certain things, when you are able to apply this thing in your life and reduce your suffering, then you have to let this thing or put this thing aside. Do not attach to this thing. Then this is a person that you can learn from. Nagarjuna's writings. Other words attributed to Nagarjuna are, so this some of the writings from Nagarjuna, but how many of them are really attributed by Nagarjuna? We really have to look into it. So in here, the most popular are the 70 verses on emptiness. This is one of the most popular books. And also, the other one is the Proof of Convention. And if you would like to explore more, you can go to the internet and look into these writings or this thesis from so-called attributed to Nagarjuna. However, there are four books or four sastra that are considered very important in Madhyamaka and also considered very popular teachings in the Madhyamaka school. One is the one that we mentioned many times, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, Zhongrun. The Mahaprajnaparamito Pandesha, 大智度论. The Veda Sanikaya Sastra, 12门论. Dashabhunika Vipasa Sastra, 十住毗婆沙论. So this four literature or sastra are considered a very important text, especially the transmissions to to China. And these four texts actually, when transmitted to China, start to establish the schools in the Buddhism schools in China. And these schools mainly emphasize on the teachings of middle path, emptiness, and dependent origination. So when we talk about what are a few important texts in Madhyamaka, you have to be able to know about these four texts. You have to know about these 4 texts, very important texts. So here, Nagarjuna's philosophy. In here, I will give a brief introduction about the Nagarjuna's philosophy. And in next class, we'll go into in-depth of his philosophy and teachings. Nagarjuna primary contributions to Buddhist philosophy was his illuminations of the doctrines of sunyata, or emptiness, in Mandarin called Kong, which he taught as the logical extensions of the Buddha's thoughts, particularly the doctrines of Anatman, non-self, and the Prityasamutpada, dependent origination. So from here, look into this paragraph, is that the Buddha, in the three Dharma cell, it taught about impermanent and non-self. Everything changed. That's why it's impermanent. Everything changed. That's why there are no unchanged entity. Because of this, that's why the nature of everything around us are considered a sunyata. Sunyata means change. So we can't just call it emptiness. But since it interprets as emptiness, so we regard emptiness as sunyata. But sunyata basically means that there's no fixed entity, and that's why it's sunyata. And dependent origination. The same thing is that there's no fixed entity that arises only by itself. It needs other things to get in order to get together, and then have this thing arises. So needs a lot of conditions to create certain things. Even like us humans, we need a father and a mother, a male and a female, in order to have a newborn baby. So everything here is interdependent on each other. And that's why there's no entity that is just by itself and unchanged. And that's why everything in this world is illusion because of the changes. But when you look at this thing, the thing is still there. It's just that it will change. Nagarjuna particularly tried to bring Buddhist doctrines such as Atman, non-self, and this Pratyasamutpada, dependent origination, according to Nagarjuna's concept of sunyata. All sentient beings cannot exist independently, thus, these sentient beings are without any self-nature. So I already explained about this. So everything needs to depend on each other. And that's why all sentient beings are without any self. Self means I, myself only. Nature. Another greatest philosophy proposed by Nagarjuna was the concept of two truths. According to Nagarjuna, there are two truths or two levels of reality in Buddha's teaching. And I will elaborate more about these two truths in the next class. This is very important as well. But this basically is a understanding from Nagarjuna, and interpret out his understanding from the Buddha's teachings. Impact of Nagarjuna to Chinese Buddhism. Kumarajiva was the first person who translated Nagarjuna's philosophy into Chinese and preached the doctrine sunyata to the whole communities of Chinese Buddhism. Since the scriptures of Madhyamaka, this sastra that we mentioned earlier, was translated into Chinese in succession, there occur a number of eminent scholars who were very interested in study of Madhyamaka philosophy at that time. During that time, it was a war time in China, in the soil of Chinese. Everybody was actually living in a very insecure situation. And when the scripture of the Madhyamaka transmitted into the China, Kumarajiva and his helpers translate out the Madhyamaka's text, the scriptures. And this Madhyamaka's text basically talks about non-self, interdependent, impermanence. This is something very new to Chinese. Chinese does not really have this concept of everything in this world is impermanent, especially this concept of non-self. And because at that time they were in a very insecure situation, so when they start to spread this concept of non-self, those Chinese scholars, eminent scholars, start to have their interest in exploring to what does that mean by non-self. What does that mean by dependent origination? And this Madhyamaka school in China start to established and later on flourished into a few schools. So impact of Nagarjuna to Chinese Buddhism, you can see from here. During the Sui and Tang dynasty, the 8 kinds of Buddhist schools like Tiantai, Sanlun. This Sanlun based on the 3 texts that we mentioned earlier as their main text. The 3 treasure school, Vijnana, Huayan, Chanzong, and the Pure Land school came into existence. All these Chinese Buddhist schools declared that Nagarjuna was their first master. Even Chan school consider Nagarjuna as their first master. However, according to some sources, out of these 8 Buddhist schools, there are a few schools such as the 3 Treasure School and the Tiantai School which have something to do with Nagarjuna. 3 Treasure School was actually in direct line of succession of Nagarjuna, based its doctrine on Madhyamika Sastra, Satta Sastra, and Dedasanikaya Sastra. So Sanlun Zhong can consider the direct succession of the Madhyamaka school from India. However, the teachings of emptiness from this Madhyamaka school more or less have some impact into other school. But this other school might took just some of the teachings from Madhyamaka, and then they start to have their own, established their own philosophy and teachings. And this is something, in a way, something normal. Why? Because it's localization. Don't forget that Buddhism originated from India. It transmitted to Central Asia. Kumarajiva was considered a monk from the Central Asia, having different language from the India. And then transmitted to the soil of China, a very different type of culture, a different group of people. They have their own religion, their own belief, their culture, in order to be able to survive in that soil. The Buddhists in China have to adjust the teachings in order to be able to adapt to the local. And this is localization. However, again, when we talk about changes, what are the things can change and what are the things can change? And this will be my assignment to all of you. What do you think? What are the things can change and what are the things can change? So look into this transmission, Madhyamaka. We have not talked about the teachings yet, but look into the history or the background of, I should say, the background of Nagarjuna and why he refused those schools at that time. Because people, in order to be able to establish a schools, they have to be able to have a strong sentence to support their philosophy. And that's why during that time there were a lot of debates among schools. And if one of the school fail, the school will be out. The students will go to another school. So in order to be special, of course, they have to do some elaboration. It's just like writing a thesis. There are so many people writing thesis. We need to find a point that are different from others. And in order to find this point, we have to compare what those other people said and refute what they said and put in a strong comment or sentence on what I think and then see who wins. And again, that's the reason why is that I always say that in my class, I don't talk about academic because you will never end. Everybody trying to say that they are the most ultimate teachings, which is something is already apart from what the Buddha trying to teach us. So in today's class, we already kick off the schools of Madhyamaka. You already know who is the founder of Madhyamaka. You know about Nagarjuna, his background. And I also give a brief introductions about the philosophy of Nagarjuna. And next week, we will touch on the teachings or the philosophy in Madhyamaka, which is quite complicated. And also you need to really empty your mind. Put aside what you think aside, and then listens to my introductions to you. And then after that, you need time to digest it. You need time to digest it because it's something about talking about the ultimate truth, not just the external factors, including us. So we will end the class today, and I will see you in next class. 阿弥陀佛。